The Russian military continues to move at a glacier-like speed in Ukraine, frustrating some of their supporters and confounding some people who expected a November or December offensive. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about Ukraine. I've been talking about that a lot lately. I think that's the big issue, and that's something we need to stay on top of. I mean, that is the issue that the world looks at in consideration of an apocalyptic threat. So that's what we need to discuss. Not only that, when it comes to the changing world order, the Ukrainian, the nation of Ukraine is the battlefield upon which the United States empire chose to stake it all. The U.S. empire has said, we're going to either keep our empire or lose our empire on Russia's border. Not a wise move, particularly considering the fact that Russia has spent many years, many years, devising a military plan to defend their border, right? If I'm going to fight you anywhere, if I'm going to fight, I'm not going to go fight at the time and place of your choosing, right? I don't want you to say, Garland and I are going to fight when. I'll let you know, Garland. I want you to fight right here, and I want to fight Thursday at 5 p.m. Why do you want to fight right there at Thursday, 5 p.m.? Because that's where I train every day. That 100-foot by 100-foot space is where I train. I have trainers. I know every inch of that space. I know the ground. I know the turf. I know the weather. And 5 p.m. Thursday is when I train because the sun's going down at just the right angle. So I know if I stand in this area, the sun will be in your eyes. The sun will be behind me. I'll have the advantage. You see what I'm saying? I let you choose the time and place that we fight. I ain't gonna win that one. I'm putting myself in a position to lose. No, what the U.S. empire has done is decided we're going to go toe to toe with Russia. We're going to go to war with Russia, but we're going to allow Russia to choose the time and place. You're going to Russia's border. That's the place that Russia has chosen. Why? Because Russia, basically, they know Russia's not going to fight outside of their border. Russia has no desire to fight outside of their border, right? Russia has set an entire military up to defend their border, not from NATO, they know, from an attack from the U.S. empire. Why would they do that? Well, every 100 years, there's the Germans, there's the French. Every 100 years or so, the West gets froggy and takes the same route from Europe. Now you can, in between there, you've got the Crimean War, 1919 after the Bolshevik Revolution, the US, the UK, but whatever. But they always take the same route. Let's go through Crimea and we're going after Russia. They know it like the back of their hand. They know the weather. They know the terrain. They know the people, and they have been planning. They have every inch of Ukraine targeted and sectored off. They know Ukraine, every hill, every mountainside. So if Russia wants to fight the US anywhere in this galaxy, if they could choose any planet, if they had the US, let's face it, let's be honest, Russia doesn't want to fight the US. They don't want to fight him. But if they have to, and they have to go in, you say to Russia, look, you can choose, just look throughout the universe, trillions of stars. You can choose a planet. We'll go through all the planets in the world. We'll pick one. Russia would say, nah, I don't want any of those planets. How about one of the moons of, no, Moscow, don't want to fight you in Moscow. Right on our border, within 1,000 kilometers of our border, we have devised an entire military and everything around it to fight within 1,000 kilometers of our border, and particularly in Ukraine, That's where we choose. And the US, let's face it, thought, ha ha ha, we took Ukraine in 2014, and that gives us time to get ready for a fight. Well, bad news. You told the Russians in 28 that you were going to weaponize Ukraine and turn it into Nato. So you've been planning to fight and setting up to fight the Russians in Ukraine since 2014. They've been planning to fight you since 2008. Everything they got is planned. It's all set up. They're ready to fight. They don't want to fight, but if they have to fight, they're ready. And when they were prepared, they acted. As Putin said, he's a martial artist, and anybody that studies self-defense and knows martial arts knows if you got to fight, if there's no way around fighting, you know I'm going to have to fight you. Strike first. You want to strike the first blow. Hey, if I got to fight you, there's two schools of thoughts. But there's very few people who argue against this. Let's say you put your arm out. Look, I don't want any trouble. So you may put both arms out. I don't want any trouble. That gives you the opportunity to act also, right? But you got both your arms out like this. I don't want any trouble. You have established a perimeter. If someone comes within that perimeter or threatens with that perimeter, that hand can turn into a fist very quickly. That hand can strike as a flat hand. That hand can quickly strike the eyes. That hand can quickly go to the Jaguar style punch to the throat, right? So you're there, boom, that can change quick, but you don't want any trouble. But you've established a perimeter. You come in that perimeter. I got plans. I got all kinds of plans. I don't want to fight, but I've practiced that if you come within that perimeter, I can come up with elbows in various different ways. I can do all kinds of things. I've practiced so much that before you know what happened, you got 4, 5, 6 hits at a takedown. You've been kneed, you've been poked in the eyes, you've been smushed your nose, your ears have been clapped, you're elbowed, groin. I mean, everything's coming before you know what happens. Why? Because I set up a perimeter. And I practiced what to do if someone gets inside of that perimeter and threatens me. They are going to catch a whirlwind, right? This is what we're talking. Russia set up a perimeter. Ukraine, Georgia, if you try to come in there, I'm going to fight. I don't want to fight. You come inside that perimeter. Here's my perimeter. I'm establishing it. I don't want any trouble, U.S. empire. I see you're building bases all over the place. You're doing all kinds of nasty things around here. You come inside that perimeter, I'm going to fight. In the same way that a martial artist or person that self-defense has practiced, so that once they throw that arm up, if you come inside of their perimeter, they got all kinds of nasty, terrible things they're going to do to you. Don't you believe for 1 second, or not, I mean, you should believe that the Russian military, when they set up that perimeter of Georgia and Ukraine, that defensive area, and said, if you come in there, you got to fight, that they planned and they sectored it off and they zeroed in on every point that they had to strike, depending on when and where and how and what they were going to attack. They got Ukraine mapped out as to everything they got to hit. They got primary targets. They got secondary targets. Ukraine is set up. Wherein, if it got ugly, right now they're taking into account the people who are in Ukraine. Let's say it got ugly in the U.S. and all, they just come in. They got a bigger plan. Trust and believe. They got a plan okay, we're really being threatened and this really turns ugly. They can go to plan B, and plan B is not going to be a friendly plan. It's that's the death blows start coming, right? So they're ready to attack. They're ready to do whatever they need to do in Ukraine. Now, let's talk about what's going on now, because the discussion, a big part of the discussion now, and has been for a while, is the speed at which Russia is acting, right? Russia made errors. Russia made mistakes. First of all, let me say this. Has there been a military engagement where neither side ever made a mistake? But part of being a good military, and I'm not saying Russia's a good or bad military, a good and professional military is the ability to learn on the fly, to be fluid, to try some things, to probe, to do this and that. If this works, you try this. If that doesn't work, you try that, right? You watch a boxing match and you see people doing all, they'll faking that shoulder, trying to make you think they're going to punch from over here. The shoulder gives away the punch. They fake, boom, throw it the other one. And then sometimes they fake the shoulder, and then they actually throw with that shoulder because they fake so many times, right? So you're faking, you're feigning, you're doing all kinds of things, right? But in that, you learn your opponent's tendencies. The Russians are learning what's going on. They're learning the different kinds of weapons. They're learning the different kind of movements, right? And they're maintaining a fluid stance. But look, how long were they in Chechnya? I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. How long has it been? They're still in Syria. They've been in Syria since what, 2014, 15, something like that. They've been in Syria a long time, right? So the idea that the Russians were just planning on marching into Ukraine, I'll put it like this. It appeared that the Russians looked at Ukraine and they said, look, if we can walk in here, if we can strike some local deals and get these things done, let's make it happen. They went in there and they gave it a shot. It didn't work. Okay. I will guarantee you that what they had was a variety of options, right? We'll do this. If this doesn't work, we'll do that. If that works, we'll do this. And then we'll move here. And what you have is you have a tree branch, right? When you plan things, we'll do this. If this works, we can go to this, this, or that. If it doesn't, we'll go this way. If that works, we can go this, this, and that. And you continue out on those branches. If that works, we can do this. And you continue to see what's happening so you can make adjustments. They're not stupid. They're not just running out there like idiots, running forward as the mainstream media would have you believe. What the mainstream media tries to give you is this Hitler thing, right? Wherein the Führer, which would be, of course, who? Putin, is sitting back there and he knows nothing about military, but he's a madman like Hitler and he's ordering his army, charge forward. And his army saying, sir, it's too cold and the men don't have food. They're weak men, charge anyway. But they're going to run right into machine guns and they'll all be wiped out. Well, they deserve to be wiped out because they're weak. Charge. We're Germans and Germans don't need heaters. We will charge forward with that. There's a mad leader who overrules all of his generals and he makes crazy decisions because he's a sociopath. That's what the West is feeding us. But all I'm going to say is this. I ain't saying that ain't so, but that's not what I'm seeing. I'm going to go by what I'm seeing. And based on what I've seen, based on what I've learned, some of this is based on what I've learned from Russian culture. Let me add this in there. And this is important. As I said, and I'd like to go back to my mentor a lot because he had so much of an influence on how I understand politics and how I view politics and how I take politics apart. And that was Paul Robeson Jr., right? Paul Robeson Jr. was a brilliant man. I learned a lot from him. Incredible. He kind of trained me a lot of stuff directly from his father, how to understand things and how to understand the world. And one of the things that Paul Robeson Jr. frequently talked about was the importance of culture. Right? If you want to understand the politics of a country, you got to understand their culture. If you want to understand the military and how a military works, you got to understand their culture. Why? Because everything springs from the culture of the country, right? And if you look at their military actions, it springs from their culture. And here's a guy who went to school in the Soviet Union, whose father was very close to the people in the Soviet Union, who Paul Robeson Jr., believe it or not, was friends with Sergei Lavrov. He knew him well. He worked at the UN for a period of time as a Russian translator, right? So he taught me about the Russian culture. I learned about the Russian culture. So if you want to understand the Russian military, and if you want to see how the Russians are going to do things and figure out how they're going to do things, understand their culture. If you want to understand the politics of a country and predict how the politics of a country is going to unfold, look at the culture of the country. And then you'll see why the politics are as they are, right? So I'll say this about the Russian culture. And as you know, so I've been studying the Russians and the Russian culture since I met Paul Robeson Jr. in 2000, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, something like that, maybe 6. See, 2006, I believe it was, maybe 2007, not sure. I think 2006. No, probably 2005. Yeah, it probably wasn't 2006. It was 2005. Somewhere along in there. So, at any rate, And as you know, I work with Russians every day, work with a Russian news service, Russian radio service. I'm around Russians a lot. I talk with Russians all constantly. Walk in every morning, Привет, как дела, right? And хорошо, спасибо, blah, 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 right? So I understand the Russian culture. What can I tell you about the Russian culture, and how can we, um, how can we um, apply that to the military? I'll say a couple things about Russian culture. Very practical, very, very practical, very straightforward, extremely cautious. I would say this about Russians. This is what I say about Russians. Russians are kind of people that look both ways before crossing a one-way street, right? Extremely cautious, skeptical. Um, you get the point. Conservative. And people who are listening to me that are Russians know I'm telling the truth. The people that are Russians that are on here know I'm telling the truth. Cautious, skeptical, practical. It's funny when people say, "Yes, the Russians are doing Facebook pages with pictures of puppies and things like that because they just want to sow chaos and disunity." And I'm like, that's stupid. That makes no sense. If you understand the Russians, they're not into sowing chaos and disunity. You know what the Russians would do? What the Russians did last December is so Russian. It's so Russians. What did they do before they invaded? They wrote down literally a list of demands, right? Okay, here we go. They wrote it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Here's our list of demands. We are going to give the list of the demands, not to the EU, but to the US, because we know the US is in charge. And what did they say? And we want a response in writing. That is so Russian. And let's add this. Putin's a lawyer. First of all, what a perfect job for a Russian, a lawyer. That's so lawyer-like. If you've ever understand the legal profession or worked in the legal profession, or you've been trained in the legal profession, or in my instance taught criminal justice, you understand. If you've ever, I was on the national board of directors for the AC, American Civil Liberties Union, which I resigned in protest, I might add, but that's a whole nother story. But I used to say, you're sitting there, that you got lawyers and law professors. That's mostly what the National Board of Directors is. And you're sitting in a room with 90% lawyers and law professors that can argue for 20 minutes over whether to use a comma or a semicolon. It's like everybody's got a point of discussion. And then you've got Robert's Rules of Orders. I'll never forget, one time we're sitting in a meeting and someone proposed to relax for one particular period so we could get something done, some of the standards of Robert's Rules of Order, so we could get some things done a little bit faster. And you should have saw these lawyers. They were squirming in their seat like, oh my God. They didn't know why. The level of anxiety went through the roof. Oh my God. Relax. Robert's Rules of Order. No. One of those slow motions. No. Like a slow falling. My God, no. You would have been better to shoot them all between the eyes than ask them to relax the standards of Robert's Rule of Order, just so we could get something done. In fact, we couldn't get anything done because people flipped out because somebody, God forbid, somebody said we should relax some of the standards of Robert's Rules of Order just briefly so we could get some done. It was, to me, I was just dying laughing looking at these people. But you have to understand, you're in a room full of lawyers. That's how they're trained. That's how they think. We must have boundaries. We must operate within the rules and standards of parliamentary procedures, blah, 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 or they can't handle it. Putin's a lawyer and he's Russian. You got that on steroids. So you take that Russian culture and the fact that Vladimir Putin is a lawyer, you put all that together, and here's what you know. What they're going to do is going to be mostly right out in the open when it comes to diplomacy, when it comes to making international deals. They're going to lay it on the table. This is what we want to do. Here's what we require of you. And here's what we will give in return. That's the Russians. Now, of course, they've understood, thanks to any number of things, Angela Merkel and people blabbing their mouths, they now know that, hey, you guys make a deal and you're not going to keep it. So the Russians are going to act accordingly. They're going to act accordingly now that they know that. But I say all that, it's important for me to have, it may have seemed as though I was just blabbering, which I was, but it was important for me to lay a foundation here about Russian culture and about the importance of structure when it comes to making deals, when it comes to things, and conservatism. Why? Because we're talking about how the Russians are going to prosecute this military campaign. So, what happened? We had a lot of people that came out and said that, and understand that with the Chinese too. That's why they're conservative, very old cultures, right? Understand that when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, and a lot of people said, well, as soon as she leaves, they're going to attack Taiwan. Well, they thought like the Americans thought. The Chinese are in no rush. The Russians are in no rush. They got time. Time is on their side. Taiwan, the Chinese know time is on their side. They know that we're trying to get them to attack Taiwan on our timetable. They're going to move on their timetable, not ours. We're not going to provoke the Chinese to act on our timetable. They're going to act on theirs, right? The person who's leading wins. Let me give you an example of something. And again, all this is, I'm not just blabbering, I probably am, but all of this is important in the context of the Ukrainian military operation. Darn it, I forgot what I was going to say. You know, I have ADD. I do that once or twice a show. I forget what the hell I'm going to say. And in about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute later, it comes back to me. But the bottom line is this. These are people who operate on their own timetable. And nobody's going to throw them off of that. Nobody's going to make them act when they don't want to act. The Russians are like that. Chinese are like that. The Iranians are like that. Same with the Iranians. The Iranians are over there saying, we're going to eject the U.S. from the Middle East. And people are like, oh, so they're going to surround their bases. They're going to firebomb. The Iranians are like, no. We got a long, as they said in Afghanistan, you got the watches, we got the time. So the U.S. is in a rush. It has to happen now. They're going to do this. They're going to attack us. They're going to use force. They're going to use might. They're going to do, no, that's what you do. They're going to use their intellect. They're going to use diplomacy. They're going to build coalitions. Now, let me get back to this. Leading in the last several months, there's been a discussion. And a big part of this discussion was how soon will the Russians act do their offensive? So what happens? September, the Ukrainians see some weak spots in the Russians' front lines. They move on the weak spots. The Russians withdraw. The Ukrainians get some PR victories. Yay, we took whatever. Liman, Sliman, Smiman, who cares? They get some Ukrainian PR victories. A whole lot of people fell apart. Oh my God, no, Liman is gone. It's fallen. Kherson's gone. Oh my God, the Ukrainians are winning. The Russians are slow, real slow. They withdrew, a tactical withdrawal. They didn't just run away because they were afraid. They evaluated the situation and they said, what are we going to defend that for? Let me put it to you like this. Think about it like this. And I think the Russians think like this. Again, let's go to self-defense. I'm standing here and somebody's going to attack me, right? I'm not defending this turf that I'm on. Some guy's standing here, right? And he's got his fist balled up like this. And he's just ready. And he's doing this. He's doing, what do I know he's doing? I know he's trying to lead like this because this is the one. And he wants to bait me with this one. And wham, this is the knockout punch. I can see he's right-handed. He wants to hit me with this. I'm going to go in that direction. I'm going to take him away from this big punch, right? I want not to act in a way that benefits him. And that's what we're looking at here. And you'll forgive me if I keep getting confused and forget where I'm going. But at any rate, it always comes back now. Keep getting confused, but don't worry about it. I have ADD and it happens and people listen to me and they know I wander all over the place, but I eventually get back to where I'm going. So what happened? Over the last several months, people have talked about the speed and the Russians did tactical withdrawals in an area where they didn't have any people, and they set up. Why? Oh, this is because, well, this is what I'm getting at. Because if you and I are fighting, I'm defending my body, number one, and I'm trying to injure yours. I'm trying to remove your weapons, right? I'm not defending turf. I'm not going to stand here and let you attack me and stand in one fighting spot and fight because I'm pretending protecting this turf. I'm going to move. I can be anywhere. You attack me, I'm over here. Now I'm over here. Now I'm down here. Now I'm up here. I'm all over the place. You got to find me to hit me, and I'm going to move. And if I see you're slower, I'll keep moving, keep moving. I'm going to make you sweat. I'm going to make it tough on you, right? So the Russians were never protecting turf. They were never protecting a spot. If you punch here and they need to move, they'll move over here. If you punch over there and they need to move, they'll move over here. Why? Because they were never protecting turf. And what am I trying to do? You throw this hand at me. If I can get this finger here, you know what I'm going to do? Pow! I'm going to bend that finger backwards. I'm going to get that pinky, right? Ugh! And I'm going to snap that pinky. Why? You don't have a fist anymore. I've taken away one of your weapons. I'm going to keep moving. If I can break a wrist, if I can hurt an arm, if I can hurt an eye, those are weapons. You can't now see me with that eye. You got to fight me with one eye. So I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to keep taking away your weapons. Every weapon I can take away from you, if it's an eye, if it's a wrist, if I can kick your kneecap and hurt your kneecap, any time I can take a weapon from you, I'm going to remove your weapons. I'm going to keep moving because I'm protecting my body, not the turf I'm on. And when people saw the Russians abandon Liman or whatever and move on, they're like, they lost it. But they were never protecting the turf. They were trying to inflict punishment on their enemy and protect their bodies. You attack Garland Nixon, you can have this desk. I don't give a damn. I can buy another desk. You can take this computer. You can take this microphone. You can have it all. I can buy all of that. You try to touch me, I'm going to protect my body. And in fact, I like this microphone. I'll take it and clunk you over the head with it. I don't care. I'm not protecting that. I'll jab you. I'll take this ink pen and jab you in the eye. Why? I can get another ink pen, but I've taken one of your weapons. Right? So what the Russians were always doing is moving, sticking and moving, punching, trying to, okay, and all this is going to align. So the Russians at some point said, we need more. We need to, okay, things have changed. And what changed was this. The Russians effectively defeated the Ukrainian military, crushed it. And now what happens? They said, well, we've defeated the Ukrainian military, but we ain't fighting them no more. Now we're fighting the U.S. and its coalition. The U.S. is there all of the money that's coming in, all of the war material that's coming in, and a whole lot of the so-called mercenaries and soldiers are coming in are being provided by the West, whether they're Americans or not. Even the bodies are being provided by the West. So at that point, the Russians said, we need another plan because we're fighting a different army. We defeated the first army that we needed to defeat. That wasn't hard. But we got another define. Or everything now is it's a new battle, and we got to set up to fight these new people. So what do? We're getting a bunch of new soldiers and war material, and we're gonna set up for a big fight. Now, I had the discussion with people. Scott Ritter, who I have on the show, great friend of mine, brilliant guy. A lot of other people, and all of us had disagreements. Nobody knows who's right. The Russians could start an offensive tomorrow. But if you listen to my show, you know one thing I've always said about the Russians and the Chinese: time is on their side. And if I have an adversary, again, this guy's big and fat, right? He's big, he's twice my size, but he's fat and he's sweating, right? I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to make him move. I'm going to make him work. I'm going to run round and round in circles. Why? Because I've been working out. I'm in shape. I know I'm in shape, right? And one of my weapons is his inability to maintain his physical strength over a course of time. I'm going to use that against him. That's a weakness that he has. I'm going to make him fight a long time. He's going to get tired. His arms are going to drop. His strength is going to decrease. Everything's going to happen. And then I'm going to hurt him. Or if he just falls to the ground, I'm going to run away. I don't need to fight him. If he gets so tired, he's like, oh, I can't fight anymore. Good. And I'll leave because I don't want to fight him. I could get hurt. Somebody could get killed. I don't want to do that. But so what happens? Time's on the Russian side. It's on their side, which means that it's another weapon that they can use. Anything I can use is a weapon. And if time is a weapon, I can use time as a weapon. And I will use time as a weapon. And if I'm the Russians, time is one of the many weapons that I have, and I will use it to its fullest extent. You don't want to overuse this weapon, but you don't want to underuse it either. If time is your weapon, you don't want to waste that weapon. You want to use it to its fullest extent. You want to maximize time. You don't want to attack until everything's perfect for you and it's prime and your enemy is at his weakness. If I'm going around in circles and this big guy who's 3 times my size, but he's overweight, he wants to fight me. If I come in the beginning, this guy's going to knock me. I mean, hopefully I can defend myself, but if he gets a good punch, I'm done. He gets a grip on me, who knows what can happen? He's strong. He may not be trained, but he may have the strength to injure me, right? Every second I make him move. I come this way, I move this way. I back up, I come at it, I kick at him a little bit. He tries to rush me, I jump aside and I hit him and I run over here. And then I run a little bit and I'm over here. And this guy's, I'm making him work. I'm making him think. He's sweating. He's getting more and more tired and he doesn't want to fight. And I'm using time as a weapon against him. I'm using his lack of physical agility as a weapon against him. So you get what I'm saying? The weapons that you use against your enemies. And I'm saying this, think about this. Putin is a martial artist. He knows these things very well. The other thing is to understand how they're working. You have to apply some of the standards of martial arts because Putin is a black belt. Apply the standards of a black belt. Anybody who's involved in martial arts understands the various disciplines of fighting, right? So let's continue. So one of the things I see the Russians doing is, as you know, I remember talking with various people. They said, okay, it's September. By mid-November, December at the latest, the Russians will have their people trained and ready to go. If they were in a rush to train them, they would. But I don't think they were. They could, boom, give them lots of training and have them to go. But what I see is this. The Russians did a couple of things. They didn't just say, we're going to mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops. Yes. They also said, we're going to upgrade our military industrial system. They put Dmitry Medvedev in charge of it, right? They cranked it up to 6 days a week, 12 to 24 hours, 2-3 shifts. Those guys that are working there are getting paid, brother. They're getting overtime. They are getting paid. And they're doing it not just to work. They're doing it to defend their nation, to defend their country. They made it clear, we're fighting against the United States. They call it the collective West, but they mean no, like I know, like you know that the United States is waging war against Russia. And they're just hiding it from their people as best they can. They've decided to wage war on Russia using Ukraine as the battleground and Ukrainian bodies as the meat to be sacrificed. The human sacrifices. That's what the Ukrainian bodies are. They're human sacrifices. So November came and the Russians said, we're training our soldiers and we're getting our gear ready. December came and the Russians said, we're training our soldiers, we're getting our gear ready. And then everybody said, well, the big deep freeze is coming. And that's when, well, guess what? No deep freeze. If you look, it's been 60. I mean, I'm here now, don't get me wrong. Maryland, DC isn't as cold as people think. You know, we'll get a cold snap and then it's 50 degrees in the winter. That's not unusual. It could hit 60, right? It's been 65, 70 degrees the last couple of weeks, right? So I've been, looking at the weather there. It's been warm. And people are like, well, it's still mushy. That means the Russians, oh no, they must be upset. I don't think so. I'm seeing trains and trains and trains of new tanks and new squadrons of new planes. They're cranking out their stuff. They're cranking out their war material. They're cranking out the things that they need. Just cranking this stuff out, right? So not only are they bringing in all these troops, they're bringing in fresh troops. They're taking extra time to train these troops so that they're so that they're highly specialized and that they're familiar with the weapons and machinery that they have. So they're going to put troops on the battlefield. who are good with the machinery that they have. See, the U.S. says we're sending 50 Bradley fighting vehicles, which is nothing, and they're light. And we're going to put people in them that just never ran them before, so they'll just barely know how to use them. And everyone that gets hit by an artillery round of artillery is going to be turned into mush, along with everybody inside of it, right? But it sounds good. The Russians are sending T-90 tanks, top of the line. They did brand new upgraded Ka-52 helicopters, these things called penicillin. They've been very effective. Counter battery radar. So when you fire something from mortars or you fire artillery rounds, this counter battery radar picks up where it came from, and you can quickly go fire back on that location. So they're upgrading what they're doing constantly with things that are integrated. Like the U.S. says, hey, we got something over here. Can you send it? Hey, what do you guys have? Well, we got something different. Send that. How about you? We got something different. Send that. And then the Ukrainians get in. They get in one piece of equipment, and the words are all in French. They get in another. The words are in English. They get another. The words are in German. Good luck. None of it's in Ukrainian. So they're getting all of this stuff that the instructions. Imagine getting something to drive it, and the words are all in Ukrainian, and you don't read Ukrainian. Okay. So here's the way I see it. This is the way I think when it comes to Russian culture. I don't think the Russians are in a rush. Could be wrong. The offensive could start tomorrow. It could have already started by the time this video is done. But on the other hand, if you're the Russians, you see the U.S. now. The Republicans are in Congress, and there's some bit of a struggle over money and stuff going to Ukraine. And the U.S. is starting to have some internal squabbles over the money going to Ukraine. You see that dynamic occurring. You see the EU. It's warm, thank God for them. But when the cold snaps, when and if the cold snaps hit, they're going to have big problems. And people are starting to go to the streets, and the NHS is collapsing in Britain, and they can't afford to fix it. And things are going bad in the U.S. empire. They ain't going good. Trust me when I tell you that. Homeless camps everywhere, poverty, misery, blah, blah, blah. You're sitting there watching your enemy collapse. You're prepping for the fight, but time's on your side. If I'm the Russians, what's the rush? And Russian culture is not a culture that says we got to act. And if I want to fight my enemy and I see my enemy getting weaker, my enemy's getting weaker. Do I throw a punch yet? No. I want to see my enemy get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And when I think that my enemy can't get any weaker, if I need to attack my enemy, that's when I'll do it. But as long as I see them getting weaker, what's the point of attacking? Let them continue to get weaker. And then when they're at their lowest, A, you can attack them, or B, you can say to your enemy, okay, look, you're about to pass out, and you're in no position to defend yourself. And I got you. I'm still ready to fight. So I'm about to knock you out. Perhaps we should just go on about our way. And your enemy stumbles and looks at you, and you're like, yeah, I can't fight. I'm too tired. I won. The weapon I used was time. The weapon I used was my ability and my agility versus this person's speed, this person's power, but lack of cardiovascular health. I just kept going till you couldn't keep going anymore, and then I didn't have to fight you. Or if I needed to fight you, I was going to knock you out. I was going to easily defeat you because you weren't in a position to defend yourself anyway. So the Russians can continue to use this time, and I suspect to some extent they will. I would. Why wouldn't they? Now, let me continue. There is something else that works very, very well for them. Real well. And look at the title of this. The Russians create a trash compactor, in Ukraine, and NATO fills it, right? One of the things that has a, a theme that has run in my videos for a long time. And I kind of use that as, gallows humor. I'll say a joke, but dark humor, none of this stuff. When you're talking about war and people dying, you use dark humor sometimes to keep, sometimes, as I said, I was in law enforcement. And sometimes you use humor to keep from being, the old thing say, and you laugh to keep from crying. You're picking up a body, and some guy says, "Hey, remember the rule The dead guy buys lunch. Ha 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 ha. Why do you say that? You're not going to take the wallet out of the body and buy lunch, but you gotta keep spirits up because there's a person there and you're picking up their body. And you got to try to get some humor so that everybody doesn't really think about what's going on, right? So sometimes you use that gallows humor to keep the situation light, to keep people from suffering as much as emotional trauma, and you know they're going to suffer some. Okay. So what's going on here? One of the things that we've seen lately, and everybody's heard about this, the town of Bakhmut. Now let's go from micro to macro. Let's use it in just the town of Bakhmut. What has happened? The term meat grinder has been used over and over and over again, right? Meat grinder. Well, what does that mean? That means that the Russians have set up a fighting area. We got lots of troops and we're going to fight like hell in that area, right? And there's a lot of fire coming into that area. All kinds of hot metal is coming into that area at high rates of speed, okay? And the Ukrainians have been stupid enough, as I said, I'm not defending an area. I don't have to. I'm defending my body. See, the difference between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Bakhmut, that's my place. That's Ukraine. I'm defending Bakhmut. And the Russians say, okay, I want to lose as few troops as possible and kill as many of your troops as I can. One side is defending real estate. The other is defending the bodies, my body, and inflicting pain on your body, taking away your weapons, your soldiers, things of that nature. So Bakhmut is an area, if I'm Russia, I now have a trash compactor. You throw in the trash, I smash it, and it's gone, right? It's a roach motel. Roaches, there was an advertisement in the US, roach motel. Roaches come in, but they don't leave, right? You set up Bakhmut, and the Ukrainians play right into your hands. And NATO, we've got to defend Bakhmut, which in a way they kind of do. They keep feeding soldiers into Bakhmut. They keep feeding war material into Bakhmut, and you keep chewing it up. And they send more in, and you blast it. And they send more, and you blast it. And you're sitting there with a sign. All right, I blasted all of the war material and soldiers that you sent last month. Please send more. And the West obliges. Okay, hold on. Here's another 100,000. There you go. Brrr, they're gone. More, please. Done. Next. It's like you're sitting at a buffet. And every time you get finished a plate, you say, send another plate. That's where the Russians are. They're sitting at a buffet. And every time they get finished a plate of Ukrainians and a plate of Ukrainian war material, they say to the West, send another plate. In comes another plate, and that gets chewed up. And the bones get spit out, and they're ready for another plate, right? So if I'm the Russians and I'm sitting on that, why the hell would I ever move? What? I've got the perfect scenario, but let's take it to its ultimate and obvious conclusion. Who are the Russians at war with? They're at war with the United States. They call it the collective West. They're at war, let's face it, the US and the UK are the Anglo-Saxon Empire. The Anglo-Saxon Empire controls the puppets in France and Germany, etc. They're not part of the Anglo-Saxon Empire. Therefore, they can all be very well disposed of and sacrificed. They're not considered part of the Anglo-Saxon Empire, right? And here's the perfect example. We were told through various sources that it was the UK that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline at the behest of the United States. They called their master and said it's done, right? Why? The Anglo-Saxon Empire sat there and they said, the Germans may go weak on us. What do you want to do? Make sure they don't. Yes, sir, I got that covered. They may not do what this Anglo-Saxon Empire wants. They must be forced. They must be brought in line. We cannot give them that option. They wouldn't blow it up. Now, the Germans aren't going to do anything about it, the German leaders, because they're part of the problem, because they conspire. They're part of what I would call, that they call in Africa, the comprador class, the people who are paid to betray the people in their constituents. It's what the black people in America, the term they used inappropriately in a lot of ways, but it became part of a colloquialism, Uncle Tom's, right? The Uncle Tom, the person who turns on his own people. The World War II's referred to the capos. Every ethnicity, every group has a term that they use for people who are in that group who betray that group, right? Those are the European leaders. That's Olaf Scholz. That's Macron. They know that's their job. They're going to pretend that it isn't. But in the end, they're just going to help the US and the UK to deindustrialize Europe. They're going to, when they get finished with Europe, Europe is going to look like those homeless camps that I keep showing at the end of my videos. That's their job. They're the comprador class. Don't hate them. That's who they are. That's what they do. If you're running around in Germany or France with a stinking blue and yellow flag, you kind of set yourself up for that, unfortunately. If you didn't, go to the streets and do the best you can. That's what you got for European leaders. Now, I'll say all that to say this. Knowing that the Russians are at war with the US empire and whatever the next ethnicity that the US empire uses as human sacrifices, the Russians can choose to fight the US empire one of two ways. They can go in a major hot war where all along the Russian border, Finland and the Baltic states and all along the Baltic Sea and all of these places, right? That Russia can have to defend its entire border if it goes to war. Now, Russia is prepared to do that, and not only that, Russia is now building its army up to 1.5 million people, building it up to a wartime defensive army. Putin has said the next decade is going to be tough and it's going to be very dangerous. And they're saying, and we're going to be set to defend ourselves because they know that countries need to be able to create their own food. Russia can do that. They need to be able to create their own energy. Russia can do that. They need to be able to defend their borders, and Russia can do that. And they're setting themselves up to be able to do it even better. They're setting themselves up to be able to do the 3 things they need to do to survive what they see as a dangerous decade, right? Now, here's what I'm saying. If you're Russia, do you want to have to fight along the Finnish border, in the Arctic, in the Baltic states borders, and on, and fight all along these borders and occupy some of these areas? And maybe there's a hole here that they have to punch, that the NATO tries to punch through, and you fight there. Maybe this thing goes nuclear. Do you want to defend all of this stuff? Or let me give you a better idea. You just fight them. Not only that, but before I say that, and if you do that, then you got to deal with NATO air power, NATO missiles, NATO, all of this. So you've got a much stronger enemy that you're fighting. You've got a much larger area that you have to defend. And it becomes much more difficult and dangerous and much more likely to go nuclear and everybody dies, right? Almost probable to go nuclear and everybody dies. Or you can do this. I'm going to fight NATO, which I'm doing if I'm Russia. I want to fight them in Ukraine, which I'm doing if I'm Russia. They're sending mercenaries. But keep in mind something. They're not sending all of the weapons that they have. Not that they got that much left, right? And now there was which I covered, there was a Washington Post article in which Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice clearly said to the Europeans, send the rest. They clearly said to the Europeans, it appears that you have a lot more weapons. Send them all. Send everything you got. Leave nothing back to protect yourself, which is even better for the Russians. Really, if you think about this. Now, do they want it to happen? No. But they would prefer just get this thing over with. But then that means that the Germans and the French and the rest of these people are not going to be attacking them along all of these the Finnish borders, the Arctic border, and all that, because they got nothing left to attack them with. So Russia doesn't have to worry about being attacked all over the place with these people because they're giving all of their stuff to the Ukrainians. And what happens then? The Russians are setting up a trash compactor for NATO. And basically, here's the setup. I set up this little wood chipper, as we call them here. If you know what a wood chipper is, go online. If you don't, look, what is it? It's this big thing that has blades in it, and it's open, and you throw wood and stuff in it, and it just grinds it up. If you throw a person, every now and then, a person's body will fall in a wood chipper. Trust me, it don't work out well. You're going to be mincemeat immediately, right? A big, gigantic wood chipper, you throw wood in there, it just grinds it into sawdust. Okay? So instead of having to fight Russia all along its border with everything Russia has, they've set up a nice little trash compactor, wood chipper, meat grinder, whatever you want to call it. They set up a nice little area, and they're putting 500,000 soldiers around that area. And they're saying to NATO, here's an area, NATO. Now, here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to just continue to funnel men in Bradley fighting vehicles and tanks and whatever you got. We've set up this kill zone. We can throw artillery on it. We can throw missiles on it. We got all kinds of stuff we can throw on it. It's a kill zone. Take all your stuff instead of attacking us all along these borders. Marshal it nicely. Take it to the Polish border, because people are like, well, why don't they just start off the Polish border and stop coming stuff in from the Polish border? If I'm Russia, that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm going to stand there. You know what I'd be like? Did you ever see the January 6th tapes where the cops were like, there was like these velvet ropes, and the cops like took the little things off the velvet ropes and step aside and went to like the people who were wanting. They're like, right this way, guys. They're like opening the doors, letting the protesters go in and all. Right. That's what I do if I'm Russia. Hey, all the stuff is going to Poland, and they're taking it right down this highway. And I'm like, I'd say to my soldiers, whatever you do, don't bomb that highway. That's where they bring the stuff in. People are like, hey, attack the highway. If I'm like the Russian leadership, I'm like, do not attack the highway. That's how they get all of their equipment and there's people to the meat grinder. Once they get to the meat grinder, we'll take care of it then. I would be willing to bet. People are like, how come they haven't blown up the bridges coming out of Western? Why won't the Russians blow up the bridges coming out of Western across the Dnieper River? No, don't blow up the bridges, because then they won't be able to continue to bring stuff into the meat grinder. Do you know what a kill zone is? When you set up somebody for an ambush, you set up a kill zone. Boom, measure it out. You got all your stuff, your platoon or whoever's lined up around it. The patrol comes along, they get in there, you throw everything you've got. Brrr, machine guns, mortars, grenades, everything into that kill zone. And you take off and get out of there. And they drop, and you fire in there, they drop, they'll probably fire back. You let them have everything you have, and you get out of there. That's an ambush, right? But imagine if you set up a kill zone and you can just sit there and patrol after patrol after patrol of your enemy troops will keep coming into that kill zone. You don't run away. You know what you do? You call back to HQ. Hey, we need somebody to keep bringing us in armaments, because we got some idiots that keep coming into the kill zone. As long as they keep coming into the kill zone, we're going to keep throwing fire on them, right? Hey, map out everything for artillery in this kill zone. We'll call you when they come in, throw all the artillery rounds in there. Boom, we'll spray them with machine gun fire, mortars, you name it. But as long as they keep coming in the kill zone, we'll keep killing them. I would bet you this. If the Ukrainians were like, let's just say there was an earthquake and a couple of the bridges across the Dnieper River were to get damaged, the Russians would probably call the Ukrainians, hey guys, I understand that your bridges have been damaged and you're unable to resupply your soldiers. You're unable to get your Western equipment across these bridges. If you would, we'd be willing to call a truce for a couple of weeks, however long necessary. We'll send some battalions of combat engineers over there to repair the bridges so that you can continue to bring the equipment in to the kill zone. And we'll get things going. And, I mean, in all fairness, come on, we don't want, you to have we wouldn't have an unfair advantage against you guys. Certainly you need your equipment. We're just kind of guys we are. We're all about fairness. So you guys lay low. We'll repair the bridges. And we'll get this thing rolling again. And then the Ukrainians could chill out. The Russians would send in, what they call the Ukrainians. Hey, could you send some bags of cement here? Maybe a little bit of rebar. We're going to get this. We'll work together. Send your guys up. Hey, let's call a truce, guys. They get the bridges built back up. They get everything good and firm. Test them. Get the engineers out there. Say, all right, look, give us 3-4 hours to get our equipment cleaned up. We'll get back over. Call the U.S. and tell them, keep the HIMARS coming. Just keep them coming. Right? Tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, whatever you God, just keep shipping them right on over to Bakhmut. Keep sending them to Donbass. And hey, we have no defense against these wonder weapons. I mean, hey, how wonder weapons are. You got to run from wonder weapons, for God's sake. So keep up with the wonder weapons, and we'll be over here losing the war and losing the information war right over here. We got you covered. That's what's going on. So the Russians are going to sit over there. They've set up a nice kill zone. They're at war with the US and NATO, and they've set up an area. And NATO is so damn stupid that they're shipping weapons and mercenaries into the kill zone. So if I'm the Russians, granted, I don't want to lose soldiers, and I want to take Bakhmut or whatever, but I wouldn't take. People are like, why won't they take Bakhmut? They could take Bakhmut. The Russians may be like this. Okay, we almost got Bakhmut. The Wagner group calls in. All right, I think we can take Bakhmut now. And then somebody calls down. Yeah, you can take Bakhmut. Yes, we have the enemy encircled, and we can take Bakhmut immediately. And they're like, yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, we talked to the boss, and he said, you guys been working hard. Why don't you come back, to the rear lines for a while? Get some snacks, maybe take some rest. I mean, come on, take a little R&R. No, Bakhmut is not that important. We can get Bakhmut another day. The Wagner group's like, yeah, but I mean, it's right in front of it. We can take Bakhmut. Can we Bakhmut here? And they're like, yeah, you're doing good work, guys. Come on. Liman's over that direction. Come on, what about Liman? You always wanted Liman. You're not paying your felt when we lost Liman. You guys are doing fine work. Here's what we're going to do. Because Bakhmut's so dangerous, we're going to reassign you over to Liman, and you can do some work there for a while. And then once there's some more stuff comes in from the west, you can go back to Bakhmut and blow the hell out of that. Because, I mean, come on, we don't want to waste Bakhmut. It's just exciting. It's important. We're writing a lot of articles about it. Hold off on taking Bakhmut. We'll let you know when we're ready to take Bakhmut. Thanks a lot. Keep up the good work, guys. No, they don't necessarily. I ain't saying they don't want to take Bakhmut. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing this out there. Could be wrong. Maybe it's pure madness. But if I'm the Russians and I got an area that is a kill zone, and you are filling that kill zone with targets. It is what they call in the military a target-rich environment. And you're sending weapons from the West, and they go into the environment, and they are targets in a target-rich environment. And now, hey, we got a call, bunch of mercenaries. Where are the mercenaries? They're at the ice rink. All right, drop a couple of Iskanders on them. Kabloom, no more mercenaries. And you call the NATO. Hey, NATO, yeah. Got any more mercenaries? Look, I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. We just blew up an ice rink, and I understand a lot of mercenaries were killed. If you want us to, rebuild and help and lay off that ice rink for a while, it's a great place for mercenaries. You can use it again. We'll give you 2 months, fill it with mercenaries. Of course, we might hit it with Iskanders after that. I'm just throwing it out there. But right now, that's a nice target. And, we've already got it vectored in and everything. So it works for you. It works for us. We're just trying to, get this thing done together. We got to be a team here. We got to work as a team, right? And that's what they're doing. The Russians are working as a team with NATO. They've got some kill zones set up. And NATO is so perfect and so stupid. In Ukraine, areas of Ukraine, if I got to fight NATO, I don't want to fight them along the Latvian, Slovakian, all the border with these kooks. Why? I don't want to do that. It's too wide. I already got a nice area. I got my troops set up there. My people at home are perfectly like, yes, we must defend our border of Ukraine. I got the population of my country behind me, right? The population of my country is perfectly supportive of me fighting in Ukraine. If the fighting goes along all of these other borders, the population may be pissed and say, this thing's getting a little scary. I don't like it. Other populations might. So from the perspective of NATO and the US, they're kind of feeling good. Well, people in Iowa might not like us getting in a broader war with Russia, but we're cool fighting in Ukraine. From the perspective of the Russians, they're like, man, as long as these idiots keep throwing stuff into the kill zone, why should we screw up the kill zone? So I think this is working out very, very well for the Russians. And it's possibly one of the reasons why the Russians have not been in such a big hurry to mount this offensive. Look, people are like, but they've got all these troops and they're ready. Yeah. And Scott makes some good points. in that he says, look, once you get the troops all ready, you don't want to leave them sit. When you get your troops ready, boom, you want to make your punch, right? But things are kind of muddy. And if I'm the Russians, right? So I don't want to make them ready. Hey, we've got our troops ready to advance to the front line. Yeah, can you train them a little bit more? Yeah, but they're ready to advance to the front line, sir. All troops ready? Ready? Yeah, troops are ready. Shall I send them to the front line? Don't they need some more training? Well, I mean, they could use some more training. Send them back for more training. And besides, we got new equipment coming. Let's not rush the troops. You know, they need to exercise a little more. Maybe the guys are not in good shape and they're a little chilly. Get them some mittens. Come on. What's the rush here of getting everybody to the front line? Why do we always have to rush around all the time here? Let's not rush the troops. Let's train them a little bit more. Get them some nice mittens. Work some things out. And then I'll let you know. When I'm ready to send them to the front line and prepare for the big offensive, you'll be the first to know. So you hold your troops off the back. You don't bring them back. You don't bring them to bear yet because you got a good thing going on. And if then your general comes up and he says to the guy in charge, he says, look, what the hell's going on? I told you the troops are ready. We're going to do this big offensive. And you keep telling me, what are you, Stalin? You keep telling me, hey, General Surovikin, Nixon, can I bring the troops forward? And you're like, nah, let's, hold off a little bit. I'm going to tell you behind closed doors, dude, don't you get it? I don't want to bring the troops up. We got NATO right where we want. They're sending mercenaries. They're sending weapons. They're sending all kinds of horse crap right into the kill zone, and we're dropping artillery on it. Don't screw this up. We can't screw it up. We can go on forever like this. Do you know how long we can build? We've got steel mills. Russia has steel mills everywhere. They can make steel. You know what artillery does? It blows up hot steel. We got all kind of natural resources. We can make things. We have enough natural resources to make things. We will continue to make things, and we will continue to drop them on these jackasses and blow them to hell. And as long as they're stupid enough to keep feeding this machine, the machine is switched on. It is a wood chipper. It is a meat grinder, and it's on. And as long as we've got meat, as long as we've got wood to go in the wood chipper, I don't want to screw that up. And if I bring all these people to the forefront, we're going to have to do something. And I don't want to do that. So let's keep rolling. So that's Garland's thought. Maybe 100% wrong. I may not know what the hell I'm talking about, but it makes sense to me that the Russians are sitting in a point in Ukraine where they can continue to batter the bloody hell out of NATO's troop. NATO can keep sending mercenaries. And keep in mind something. There's another advantage. If they go and fight them all along the entire Russia border and becomes a broad war, NATO can send their 20,000 troops here, 40,000 troops. Straight out, just send their troops, right? NATO uniforms, U.S. uniforms. There's the troops that come in, and there's everything, planes, right? But as long as they're doing it in Ukraine, they have to pretend like they're not. So they can only send but so many. They got to send a few at a time. 5,000, 10,000 mercenaries. And they can say to these soldiers, yeah, you're officially retired from the German army. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to send you over there as mercenaries, and we're going to put a uniform with a Ukrainian patch. And needless to say, it's going to probably have some really questionable other patches on it that may be related to a certain ideology that was quite popular in Germany in the mid-1940s. But that's a whole nother story. But the bottom line is, so NATO has to be sneaky. And so they'll send you a trickle. 5,000 here, 10,000 here, instead of 100,000 at a time. So you're like, Russia, we'd like to put an order with NATO. Yes, 5,000 mercenaries, please. All right, here's 5,000 mercenaries. Artillerymen, do your work. Bleep. Yeah, didn't work out so well. Could you send 5,000 more? I think those are gone. And they just keep sending you mercenaries. Bloop. Poles, done. And now it appears to me that the NATO is souping up the dumbass Poles. And this is beautiful. Think about the Poles. The Ukrainians killed 100,000 Poles. The people who are in charge of Ukraine during the World War II killed 100,000 Poles. And now the Poles are going to join with these people to fight the Russians. You can't make this up. That's a special kind of stupid that you can't even make up. But I suspect this. That kind of stupid will get you killed in big numbers. When you're that stupid, that's like a lemming kind of stupid. That's like a suicidal kind of stupid. You know what I mean? That's like the person, that's a Darwin Award kind of stupid. That's the kind of stupid that gets you dead. So it is possible that the Poles, in their ultimate stupidity, may say to themselves, I know what we'll do. We'll drag the US into this. We're going to go into Ukraine. And the Russians are all prepared if you do. And they will turn, you ain't seen nothing. See, you see, the Russians see the Ukrainians as their brothers. So they are having some level of mercy on the Ukrainians, not on the Ukrainian soldiers, but on the Ukrainian people. If the Poles come in, you ain't their brothers. You ain't getting no mercy. They ain't pulling no punches. They are going to put a licking on you. If the Poles send 20 or 50,000 troops in the Ukraine, and if that's Belarus has already said, if we're down, we're not going to let the Poles come up to our borders. If the Poles think they're coming up to them, and it would be stupid, you're going to come down in here and be surrounded. But again, the Poles, from what I've seen recently, are just that kind of stupid. And they march right down into there, and a gigantic, I mean, the Russians, they got tanks, they got aircraft, man, they got hardware just sitting there in Belarus. They're just saying to the Poles, you come in here, man, what we are going to put on you is something that the law don't allow. So in their ultimate stupidity, the Poles, and I don't mean the Polish people, I mean the leaders, the nutcase fruitcakes that lead the Poles, could possibly say, yes, we'll go in here, we'll start fighting the Russians, and then we'll call the US and say, okay, US, we're having some trouble with the Russians. Could you join us? And they're going to go, what do you think? Hello? Hello? US? Hello? I can't hear you. The Russians, the US ain't coming to your aid. You'll go in there and you will get slaughtered like the Azov battalion without mercy, as they say in in the military, terminated with prejudice, with extreme prejudice. If the Poles come in, I think too, here's the thing. If the Poles come snooping into Ukraine, the Russians and the Belarusians want to make an example out of them. They want to send a message. They will send a message using the Polish military. If the Polish military creeps into there, they will send a message to everybody else. If you want to fight us, the pain will be immense, and they will slap the God only knows. They'll chew them to pieces very quickly. They will hit them with heavy, heavy, heavy stuff really quickly and really brutally. So whether the Poles are setting up, I think part of what the Poles may be doing too, and I'll go another way, is it's possible that the Poles and NATO and certain forces are looking at this thing like I am, like we are, and they're saying the end could be nigh. And if in fact the Ukrainians get in a collapse type situation, that the Poles want to be in an area to at least negotiate for some part of Western Ukraine. Why the hell they would want it, I don't know, because the people in Western Ukraine don't like them any more than like the Russians, and it's going to possibly most likely be a rump state that's unable to economically support itself, and you're going to take a poor area of one of the poorest areas in Europe with a bunch of fruitcake fascists, which the Polish leaders are. You ain't going to be in the long run. If the Poles take Western Ukraine And of course, the Hungarians are looking at some areas. There are people looking at the body, saying this body may be cut up, and if it does, I want this part. I want to eat that part. Blah blah blah. But in the long run, I don't think the Poles will be happy. So I think the Poles may be putting together an army not to challenge Russia, but in the event that there's some negotiations, and Russia implies, I would turn my head if you took this part of that, they want a military capable of occupying a portion of Western Ukraine. That's possible. If they think that they're going to go to war with Russia and draw the U.S. into it, that ain't happening. The U.S. will allow them to go into Ukraine and be slaughtered, and then say, "Oh, it's a shame what happened to the poor Poles." Hope that doesn't happen. First of all, the Germans don't like the Poles, and the Poles don't like the Germans. The Germans wouldn't be happy to see Poland expand and take more land. The Germans wouldn't be happy with that because they don't trust the Poles. They don't get along. They don't like each other, for a number of reasons. A lot of people in Europe got issues with the Poles, particularly the Polish leaders, because the Polish leaders are friggin' nuts. Look at what they're doing. I mean, they're committing economic suicide, for God's sake. But at any rate, so that's all of it. I don't think I have much else to say. I think that's all I have to say. There'll be more soon. Let me look and see. Not a lot of super chats today, but that's okay. That's okay. People super chat when they can. So let me look, and then we'll go. I want to first thank Duckin. Super sticker. Thanks a lot. Duckin or Dukin? I'm not sure. I want to thank everybody. If I see any super chats, looks like we might only have a couple. All right. Raphael Ligon says, gee, once the Confederates lost Gettysburg, right, they started to talk about stop the war because they lost their army. So Ukraine lost their army, and we're going to bring a new army to do what? Crazy. Yep. Well, the problem is, it's a long story, but to make a long story short, the U.S. doesn't. When the U.S. loses Ukraine, not if, when it uses Ukraine, it loses the world. When it loses Ukraine, it loses the world. Because the United States has said, well, we can surround any country, no matter how big, and we can impose our will upon them because we are the unipolar power. That's one of the things that makes them the unipolar power, that they can surround any country, that they can impose their will on any country economically and militarily. When they lose the war in Ukraine, that will mean that have been able to do neither, that they have not been able to economically impose their will on a country, Russia, or militarily. And the development, see what the saps at the U.S. In the U.S. don't understand it. The rest of the world, the Africans, the Middle Easterners, almost all of Asia, with a few little U.S. puppetry exceptions. Latin America will stand up and cheer Putin. They'll say, you knocked the U.S. off the hill. They've told every single country, we can do anything I want, and there's nobody that can do anything to stop us. And somebody did. And they were unable to impose their will upon you. So that's what the changes in the world. That's what Ukraine is really about. It's about whether or not the U.S. empire can impose its will upon any country in the world. And Russia says, you can't impose your will upon us. You can't do it economically because we're far too powerful. And the U.S. can't. That one's lost. That one's over. You can't do it diplomatically because we were able to build a coalition. Why? Because the people in Africa, and they've said it, the people in South Africa have said it. What did they say? The Russians see us as equal. The Russians see us as human beings. Of course, the U.S. see us as monkeys, basically, as Uber mentioned, right? So the people in South America, the brown people, the indigenous people that have been slaughtered by the U.S. empire and colonialism in Europe, the people in Africa who in the Muslim world, and all these people who have been slaughtered by U.S. and UK colonialism, are looking at Russia saying, "Holy crap! You told them no, and you said no. Number one, you can't have Ukraine, and if you keep trying, I will kick your ass right out of it." and you kicked them out. And they said, we'll fix you. We'll shut your economy down. And you said, no, you won't. We got too many friends. We got too many powerful friends. You can't do it. Give it a try. That the U.S. said, we'll take you out. And the Russians said, let's dance. And they couldn't do it. And that's it. Game, set, and match. Now, I would argue the unipolar empire is already over. The U.S. is just learning it the hard way. But at the end, and the U.S. and the neocons know it, and there's nothing they can do about it but commit suicide. All they can do is put a gun in their mouths and pull the trigger along with everybody. That's their only other option. And I don't believe they'll do that. There's a reason they're chicken hawks. None of them been in the military. These are not brave people who are going to go out and blaze of glory. They're corrupt chickens. Every last one of them. They ain't going out in the blaze of glory. They're not fighters. They're not on the front line with a weapon. They're standing in the back somewhere, writing an op-ed for the New York Times or the Washington Post. That's what these neocons do. They ain't getting it. They're not setting things up where bombs or missiles are going off over their house, blowing themselves to. They're scared to death of that. They ain't doing that. They will take their whipping and try to redefine it as a win. But the world will know what it is. And you and I will know what it is. And that's what Ukraine is all about. And the track of the matter is this. Once that happens, what's left as far as Taiwan, because that's the other thing they want to do, the same thing with Taiwan. How does that even work? Once you've lost in Ukraine, how does Taiwan even work? How do you just pick up and say, oh, shoot, yeah, okay, we're going to go over to Taiwan and do it now. The world will laugh at you. And Europe will say, dude, nah, no. This dog don't hunt no more. We lost this one in Ukraine. We can't take scene 2 of this play. Scene 1 was too hard. Your coalition falls apart. It's game, set, and match. That's what Ukraine is. At any rate, so thanks a lot, everybody. Oh gosh, I forgot. I got people on Rockfin. Let's see what the people on Rockfin. I got some people who have done tips on Rockfin. All right. Tamara Gelsleister says, love you, Garland, from Russia with love. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that. We got some other people in Rockfin that may or may not have given tips, and I don't want to miss any of them. Okay, Linda says, I'm looking forward to hearing you speak in D.C. on February 19th. There'll be a Rage Against the War Machine event in Seattle. Wow, on the same day. For more information, follow Action for Assange, Seattle on Twitter, or send an email to Seattle4, that's the number 4, Seattle for Assange at proton.me. Thanks a lot. That's Linda. And I think that's it. All right. And before I leave, oh no, I didn't see your super chat, Jessica. I'm going to look. Jessica, I'm going to look for your super chat because I don't want to miss Jessica's super chat. James says, look forward to seeing you at the 219 Rage Against the War Machine rally in D.C. Thanks a lot. I'm looking for Jessica. Don't want to miss her. The Karen 12, says, hi all. Thanks a lot. Mario Menace, thank you very much. Oh, I'm looking for Jessica's super chat. I do not. God, no, please. I can't miss Jessica's super chat. I haven't found it, but I'm going to keep looking. If it takes me all night. Jessica, found it. Off the subject, can you look at Bernie's tweet? How can we pass legislation in Brazil? Just thought you might understand and could explain. I will look at Bernie's tweet. I don't know what Bernie's latest tweet is, but I don't pay much attention to Bernie, to be honest, because I see Bernie as one of the problems. Bernie's part of the machine. Bernie is gone to the dark side as far as I'm concerned. So I don't look at his tweets because he's part of that tweet squad. You know, every now and then they tweet like, wouldn't it be great if everybody had Medicare? Wouldn't it be great if there was peace on earth? Wouldn't it be great if everybody had some chicken soup and a nice hot cup of coffee? You know what I mean? It's always some crap. So I'll look for Bernie's tweets, Jessica. I appreciate that. How can we pass legislation in Brazil? To be quite frank, I don't know a lot about Brazil. Lula's there. I'm hoping for the best. My nephew lived there for 5 years, and he really enjoyed it. Beautiful place. And thank you very much, Jessica. I tell you what, you can email me, Jessica. I'll see what I can find out. garlandin@gmail.com. garlandin@gmail.com. Feel free to email me. I did not want to miss Jessica's. That was. I see Kinky's around. Thanks a lot, Kinky. I see a lot of my friends. Wow, we got 1,200 people. So I will end with this. I'll leave Jessica's tweet up. Thanks a lot, everybody. I certainly appreciate it. For those who can't afford to help the channel, and if you can't afford, use the money for your family. Take care of yourselves. If you can afford to help the channel, a couple of things. Certainly, you can do Patreon. If you can do $3, $5, $100 a month, whatever you can, patreon.com/Garland Nixon. I've got a PayPal account. You see garlandin@gmail.com. Buy me a coffee is always great. If you don't like PayPal and those kinds of neoliberal places, buy me a coffee is great.com/garlandin. And for some ungodly reason, they stuck an H. Garlandin H. I got Cash App. You see that? #DC Also, we got 1,200 people. That means we should have 1,200 likes. Everybody, please make sure you like. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you click the little bell so you get notifications. And make sure you go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon and you subscribe. You become a member there. It's perfectly free. Rockfin is great. It's just like YouTube, only better. And it's a free speech platform. I've got a number of things that I've done on YouTube that have been demonetized. One that was even shut down that's still on Rockfin. So it's always on Rockfin. It's this free speech platform with no advertisements. Let me explain real quick about Rockfin. If you can afford to become a subscriber on Rockfin, it's $14.99 a month. But if you join for a year, you get 2 free months, which means it's only $9.99 a month. And it's really good. You don't have to do that. You can be a free member at Rockfin. But if you're a subscriber, it helps keep Rockfin going because Rockfin doesn't do any advertisements. It keeps going with subscribers. So I really appreciate the subscribers. And additionally, I do 1 week subscribers. All creators on Rockfin do 1 premium show per week for subscribers only. I do mine every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. with Scott Ritter. And it's an hour-long show for subscribers only. I do the first 15 or 20 minutes on all platforms, but after that, it's a subscriber-only show with Scott Ritter. God knows it's well worth it. Everybody watches that show, and everybody learns so much. Scott, like, even says, "Hey, man, I saved the good stuff for you." So that's awesome. I've known Scott for a while. I interview him a lot. We're good friends. He's awesome. So I get some insider information. If you can afford to be a subscriber on Rockfin, I would appreciate it. That keeps Rockfin going with no advertisers. If you can't, just become a member and you'll see everything except that 1 subscriber only show. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I am tired, and enjoy yourselves, and peace. I'm out.